I think each time we have a halving cycle, you have more people that will come into Bitcoin, and they'll come in for basically number go up technology because they'll see it as something like, wow, hey, maybe you can like make money on this. I think that's the original hook that gets most people. But you have some amount that actually have dug their hooks in deep enough and they're actually starting to educate themselves. And then you kind of have this core that builds up of actual people that kind of understand Bitcoin. Bitcoiners are kind of dealing with the fact that, hey, we have to recalibrate to a world where we're actually responsible for, ourselves, our security, our family, and these type of things, which I think is actually a lot better than kind of handing off your agency and your sovereignty to third parties and trusting them to do the best job for you. And the 2032 halving is when I think we go under 1 Bitcoin per block for the first time. So the block reward drops under 1 BTC per block because of just how we go in half every time. Realistically, you only have 1% of the Bitcoin supply left to mine from 2032 to basically 108 years. So from that point out, if you haven't already got in, then I think you're pretty much like...
I wanted to start with something different, but because we just talked about that, how do you balance as an artist to be anonymous and being recognized for the art? Like how do you do that? And do you see sometimes the challenges of like not having a face to promote something in the art, or do you maybe even see it add on to the privacy other advantages?
I guess like everything in life, it has its trade-offs. There's both a lot of positives and a lot of negatives. Although I will say, when I've gone to a lot of Bitcoin conferences and I meet Bitcoiners that are very public, a lot of them have told me, oh man, I wish I had kind of done more like you, where I just kept myself more private and didn't expose my face or whatever. So I think there is some sense within the community that that there's just a level of safety. I think security is always the spectrum. You can't ever have perfect security. You could just do the best you can. And as we were talking about just the last month, the past, in January of 2025, there's just been so many physical attacks against either people holding Bitcoin or some kind of shit coins. And, it's actually relatively scary to see that level of attention. And a lot of these people, yes, they did expose themselves. So I think there was some recently, the most recent one was like some porn star that showed a video of her Bitcoin wallet that had $20 million. So it's like, that seems like a relatively easy target. If you ever see like a heist movie, this one just doesn't seem like terribly complicated, So, but these guys even messed it up. Even these guys, like they ended up getting shot by the porn star. So, kudos to her for, securing herself that way. But it just goes to show that there's certain levels of things that you need to just have due care with online. And we just live in a world where we haven't been conditioned for that. Most people go ahead and they share everything that they have on the world. And it's just the way that we're trained to do nowadays. I just think that's very dangerous. And I always try to tell family members when they're posting pictures of kids and stuff like, hey, you shouldn't do that because the kid's not old enough to basically give consent to give their digital identity away. And you're their parent. You should be protecting that. You should like let them make that decision when they're older, because if you feed a child's photos into the machine every day since they're a baby until they're 18, it's going to have a very good idea of what they look like at every age. The AI will be able to just figure out what you look like at 65 with a beard or with no beard or with blue eye, like whatever disguise you're wearing, it's going to be able to imagine that. So it's going to become, so I just think like that's like, one of those digital stewardships that people are just not aware of. And I think as an artist, I think it's much better for me because I think there's no benefit for people knowing what I look like. I'd rather have the art speak for itself. Like if there's any merit to it, there's a lot of artists that will take pictures of their art. And, I see a lot of like female painters or different artists, they'll take pictures of themselves with the art. And yes, they're super cute. Okay, I get it. But like the art should kind of stand for itself, I feel. So I think like, and I'm not super cute, so I can only be a negative to myself. So if I show myself with my art, I'm not going to have the same reactions that these people are having. So I figure it's only to my benefit to stay hidden, so people don't know how ugly I am. But I think all around it does make things easier. For example, if I'm walking around a conference, a big Bitcoin conference with some of my friends that are much better, well-known people in the community, I could just walk through the conference and nobody even notice me or say anything to me. Whereas these guys can't walk 5 feet without somebody saying, "Oh, hey man, I love your book. I changed my life." Like some people are super recognizable, and I guess if you thrive on that type of thing, then that's cool. But I don't, and I actually enjoy the opposite side of it. I like to be like, okay, I'm in this big crowd of people, and that actually works to my favor. No one knows who I am, and so I think that that's been very, very helpful to me. I think like I just do my best with it. It's not perfect, and I'm sure I make all kinds of mistakes, but you just do the best you can. I mean, I even got a death threat. Right when we had, I don't know if you saw it, but like a few weeks ago, when all the strategic Bitcoin reserve stuff was going on, I said some anti-XRP thing. I don't know what it was, and then some guy sent me like a death threat over Twitter DM, and I was like, man, I guess this is. He actually said something about, oh, imagine you're being Bitcoin only. That's so stupid. And I was like, man, is this the first death threat for being Bitcoin only? But, like that is so crazy and so stupid. Like I just made an offhand comment and people threaten you. So it's like, that had nothing to do really with Bitcoin specifically, or me making like an OPSEC mistake. It just was like some random comment, but like, just by my having this a little bit layer of anonymity to help, or pseudonymity to help, is nice. But certainly, like, yeah, if anybody's well motivated to kill me, I guess they'd probably be able to do it. So it's certainly worrisome. I guess we just live in a wild world with a lot of with both a lot of threats and a lot of opportunities. So it's hard to balance everything between. So like I said, it's trade-offs. There's certainly a lot of benefits to showing your pace and coming out public, but I think there's a lot of benefits to also reserving some of that, to selectively reveal it when you choose to who you choose to.
Yeah, and it's kind of a one-way street. Like once you go public, it's like almost impossible to go back. You can try, but especially if you reach a certain level of publicity, you will never succeed with getting everything off the internet again. So like, even if you delete your own stuff, there's stuff that people repost, or like take the picture, or have it on another podcast, or like there's just like
No, you're 100% right. Yeah, and the more exposure, the harder it is. Like the Michael Saylors of the world, they're just never. Like AI can just tell you exactly what he looks like, because there's so much images of him online that he's never going to take that back. He's not the type of person that cares. He obviously likes getting that kind of recognition, but I think like it's certainly a tricky situation. We had the whole thing with HODLNOT where he was in the Craig Wright trial, and they basically doxed him the whole time, and showed his picture and stuff. But I think a lot of Bitcoiners were cool about it, and they didn't repost pictures, and they kind of kept that respectful and whatnot. But you can't always depend on people to be cool. And realistically, like once it happens, there's no putting the genie back in the bottle. So it's really too bad for what it is. And unfortunately, like there's no human that's perfect. It's like, that's one of the things that's so cool about Satoshi, is to see how this person had absolutely perfect operational security that all these years later we still have no idea who he is, which is a beautiful thing. So I think like that's something to aspire to for all of us. And, it's just, or for those of us who are, security conscious or overly paranoid in that way.
It's, for me, it's kind of almost over. It's something that I think about sometimes, actually, of like, okay, like, could have done it differently, or should have done it differently. And I always say like, it's good there are public people also, like we need that. But from an individual standpoint, I guess there are a lot of upsides to do, not for other people not to know, because I think about securing my own Bitcoin way more now, of like having no threats, and then like, okay, like what if actually someone figures out my address? Like, I mean, everyone should do that, I think. But especially if you're public known, you have to just be way more careful and way more thinking about all the small tidbits of like, okay, who do you speak to? Like, where are you going? What are you doing within your house? And where do you keep your Bitcoin? And how do you just playing that example of someone breaking into your home and wanting to have your Bitcoin, what are you doing in that situation? You should have a plan for that. I mean, that can happen to anyone, but if you're publicly known, you could higher your chances of doing that way more. That's why a guy like Michael Saylor has security because his threat is very, very high. Mine is almost non-existing and next to him. And so that's something that I already think about, even though I'm a very, 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 very small fish in the whole ecosystem. Imagine being just 2, 3, 5, 10 levels above that. You almost have to have security, like physical, like people, and like houses, and then like gated communities and stuff like that. Like, I don't want that, but yeah, that's the main downside to being publicly known, I guess.
Man, you bring up so many good and powerful points in there, and it brings me back to some old Bitcoin historical reference points. So the Bitcoin Citadel idea was originally a short story that somebody wrote. I don't know if you ever read the Citadel short story. It was a very dystopian short story. I really didn't like it because of that, because it was kind of like you were saying, where basically you have to set up citadels to protect yourself. And like, it was basically communities of Bitcoiners that would say, like, hey, if you're Bitcoiner, you can come here. We can kind of protect ourselves from the rest of the world. And it was like segregating things off because, you know, there was the haves and the have-nots due to the wide separation between Bitcoiners and fiaters. So that's certainly like one thing that it brings up. But then also from what you were saying, just about the basic security of things, like a lot of Bitcoiners will, you know, they post pictures of themselves on planes, like, hey, I'm going here. So number one, that means they're not in their home. Number two, that means you know exactly where they're going and when they're going there. And then number three, this brings me back to this weird Bitcoin trivia. There's this guy, a shitcoiner named Base Carbon. He flew, I think this was 2017 or 2018, and I kind of watched this whole thing unfold on Twitter. It was wild. I haven't seen anything about and talk about it since then. So it's not like a really well-known event, but this guy basically flew from somewhere, I think from Canada into somewhere, or from somewhere into Canada. And he said, hey, I'm going to be here. If anybody wants to hang out, like, let me know. And some girl said, yeah, cool, let's hang out. And he's like, okay, cool. So, and she ends up picking him up at the airport. And they go around and he's tweeting through the day. Okay, cool. Hey, we're here. This is me and the girl. We're hanging out, whatever. And then at some point he posts, oh, she robbed me for like $500,000 or something like that. And like everybody was like, bro, you didn't see this coming. Like, you know, it was like, it's so obvious, you know. So, and then people were making memes out of him, put him and her together and stuff like that. But it's just like, these type of attacks are not new. It's just that every time it hits the news cycle, you probably, like, that was 2017. So Bitcoin was certainly in the news cycles then. So it's probably the same thing now. And, you know, time is a flat circle. So you just see these same type of things pop up again and again. But it's just the type of thing that, yeah, it's probably best to limit that type of information that you put online, and then also just limit what you expose yourself to, because not everybody is a friend, even though they may, you know, seem friendly.
And it has its advantages and disadvantages. For example, I have a small story. I was going to El Salvador and I actually stopped posting any Instagram stories. So I focus now solely on posting podcasts, articles, and in the future books, and not posting like, hey, I'm on the plane, hey, I'm doing this. First, because I think it doesn't add any value. So I think it's in a way senseless. And second, it's a security thing. But the first thing is more important for me, that it doesn't add any value. And actually was in Toronto on the airport. And two women came up to me that watched the podcast, and then like two more guys came up and they were guests actually on my podcast, and it was from Canada to El Salvador, and was adopting Bitcoin. So there were actually like half the plane was full with Bitcoiners that I discovered later. But it just made me realize they could also just recognize me and be kind of a threat. I mean, that was something that, it was a great conversation, and I loved it because I had like a 2-hour overlay, and otherwise I would have been bored. and they, with the four of us were like talking and having fun. So that was actually something really positive. But at the flip side, this also gives you exposure to threats, because all of a sudden you're like, okay, like he's Bitcoiner. I know him. He is like hundreds and hundreds of episodes of podcasts. So it has its advantages and disadvantages. And I personally was like, okay, I'm doing this now. And I will do it. And if something happens to me, I'm okay with that because I know the risks. Like I could have chosen, because when I started the podcast, I basically actually had that conversation with myself. It's like, do I want to do that? Like that was one small thing that I thought about. And I was like, okay, I will live with that risk, because I want to thrive with the podcast and with other things and I also like, that human connection. So like, I like that people come up to me in the conference and say like, hey, I watched the episode, and then we have a really great 1-2 hour conversation sometimes. And it's really nice. And then later I never see them again. So there were no threats directly. It was just a great conversation. So long story, but, the point I was making, I knew the security risk from before, and I chose that because I like that human connection. But if if something happens to me, it's okay for me. I knew it.
I love talking about risky. This stuff, because this is something that not a lot of people think about, and it's cool that you actually did do that. What in essence is called a risk assessment. So you went ahead, you reviewed the risk, you said, what is the risk to me? And then sometimes when you mitigate a risk, you actually you don't do anything about it. In this case, it's like, hey, well, I actually understand the risk, and I think this is fine because of these things. And that is the mitigation in essence, because at least you've assessed the risk, you know what it is, and you basically know what the consequences are, and kind of are cool with that. And I think that's exactly how you got to operate with everything. Like everything is a risk assessment. You know, it's like everything has a different level of risk to you. So it's just a matter of, is this something I actually care about or not? Because you can't treat every risk like as the super high priority. So I think it's really neat to have both of us here, because it's really kind of neat, because we both do have a very similar experience in that way, because I also thrive on like the human interaction as well. I like that as well, but I just like to I like to kind of selectively filter who I let in through the window. And the way that I do that is usually, if I'm at a conference, sometimes if I meet people, I would just introduce myself, just like I kind of have a nickname that I go by, just introduce myself as that. It's not my name. It's not FractalEncrypt. And so like, they don't put 2 and 2 together. It's just, hey, this is like some friendly dude, and we talk Bitcoin or whatever, and it's just is what it is. And if I think they're cool, okay, maybe sometimes I'll actually reveal like, this is, this is, who I am. And then sometimes they'll actually know me, and then we'll have a similar conversation where, like you're saying, like these relationships that happen through the work that you've done do open up really cool opportunities. And I'm a big believer in, like being in the right place at the right time. So I think it's important to kind of put yourself in these places. But I don't think your identity is always important in those things. It's just a matter of you showing up and like being present for the magic to occur. But I love talking about these type of things, just because it's not something that most people really are aware of. And being your own bank is a totally different thing. It's just not something that people are used to. They're used to giving up their responsibility to a third party. So Bitcoiners are kind of dealing with the fact that, hey, we have to recalibrate to a world where we're actually responsible for, ourselves, our security, our family, and these type of things, which I think is actually a lot better than kind of handing off your agency and your sovereignty to third parties and trusting them to do the best job for you, because realistically, like nobody cares about you but you. So yeah, like your family, like basically you'll have a small community that might actually care, but outside of that, you're basically on your own. So I think the more that you learn to handle on your own, the better off that you can be, because just so much nowadays wants to basically harvest your time and attention away from yourself.
Does your family and friend circle kind of know that you're a Bitcoiner? I talked to some unknown Bitcoiner and they don't even say it to the, like sometimes their close environment doesn't even know that they are Bitcoiner.
No, my family definitely knows. My mom's known for a long time. My brother kind of was one of the ones that like originally started kind of getting my attention peaked with it. So certainly family is well aware of it. Friends, like most of my friends don't, like they might know that I'm a Bitcoiner, but they don't know that I like do art and do all this other stuff for Bitcoin for the most part. And it's mostly because people don't care. There's like a surface level of acquaintance that most people have, and they're fine with that. So if like it's just somebody that's like a small talk person that I'm just meeting, okay, cool. I mean, of course I have some friends for, that are like lifelong friends, and to some degree they care about me for me. They don't care about me for anything else. So it's like they may or may not like the art or know about the art stuff that I do. But most of them are somewhat aware that I'm into Bitcoin, because I think I went through my phase of trying to like bring people onto the arc at some point early on. At this point, I've given up. It's like people find their own way, and it's also dangerous to try to lead them here, because it's just like most people don't have the temperament of a Bitcoiner. So you have to I think like you kind of have to search it out rather than like try to lead everybody into it.
There's an interesting point actually of like how we are going, because I'm a firm believer that at some point everyone will use Bitcoin, but not everyone will be really aware of that they're actually using Bitcoin in the similar way of the TCP/IP protocol. I mean, granted, a lot of people on this earth actually don't have the internet and don't use the TCP/IP protocol. But when I say like everyone, like in a like let's say over 50% of the world, so it's always fun to talk about how we are actually going to scale there, and how we actually going to get that mass adoption happening. And then I'm really curious on your thoughts on this.
I think that we just will continue to see waves of Bitcoiners come in like we have over the different halving cycles. I think each time we have a halving cycle, you have more people that will come into Bitcoin, and they'll come in for basically number go up technology, because they'll see it as something like, wow, hey, maybe you can like make money on this. I think that's the original hook that gets most people. And then that like washes out a huge amount of them as well in the cycle. But you have some amount that actually have dug their hooks in deep enough, and they're actually starting to educate themselves. And then you kind of have this core that builds up of actual people that kind of understand Bitcoin. And the variety of those type of people is starting to change exponentially. At the beginning, it was mostly, cypherpunks and tech nerds, but nowadays it's like bakers, lawyers, doctors, Michael Saylor, like everybody's kind of coming in, and they all bring their own perspective and own like unique basically views into Bitcoin, which I think is so cool, because it's like everybody's like, man, you could see Bitcoin through this lens or that lens or this lens, and it just makes sense. It's like so unifying in so many ways. I think the reality is that Bitcoin, I mean, it's dangerous to say this, but like Bitcoin is bigger than religion in some senses. Like religion was what was always unifying the world in the past. In the Renaissance period, that's what like caused people to build cathedrals and, build these magnificent things like that. And I think all the art, like the Renaissance art, most of that was religious art, or either that or portraits of kings and stuff. And I think Bitcoin is bigger than that, because these religions are also, while they are unifying for certain people, they're also divisive, because the people that aren't of the same ideology, they're different in some sense. Whereas I think Bitcoin is money, and all humans kind of need money to live in order to feed themselves and that. So I think it's something that will cross all these boundaries. So over time, like you said, everybody's going to be a Bitcoiner. That's basically common sense for, I think, any Bitcoin. It's just that like we will all use Bitcoin one day. And like you said, probably some people won't even realize that they're using Bitcoin, because it would just be so mundane. Like when we were kids, you used $1 and you didn't think about like what is money or the whole debt system or the whole, any of that, it was just $1 was $1, and what it was worth today, it was worth 10 years from that. You didn't know any difference about that. You didn't know about like the financial markets where people were trading currencies and things are actually changing value every second. It's like, you save $5 today, you think it's worth $5 tomorrow. You don't realize that you're buying less stuff with it. And that's another thing that Bitcoin will change conceptually for a lot of people's brains as well, because if you move to a Bitcoin standard from a fiat standard, you move from an inflationary system to a deflationary system. And what people don't realize is that means that every year when you go to work, you don't get annual raise. You have to kind of like fight to keep your current salary, or most likely you'll have to like negotiate your annual decrease in salary, because the purchasing power of Bitcoin keeps increasing. So you're basically able to purchase more, even though you're getting less sats. Like, okay, you were getting 1 million sats, now you're getting 900, but like last year a house cost $1.5 million, and now it only costs 1.1. So your purchasing power has increased. So even though you get less sats, now you're richer. So it's like prices go down, salary goes down, everything trends towards zero in terms of Bitcoin. So that's just a conceptual thing that a lot of people argue with me about, because they don't believe that they go, hey, if I work every year, I'm not going to get a raise. But it's like, yes, you'll get a decrease in your pay and you'll be happy about it, because your purchasing power increased from what it did last year. You actually still make more, you can earn more, you buy more with what you're making today than what you did all of last year, because of the appreciation of Bitcoin. And that's just a hard concept for people to come to terms with. So I think there's like going to be that's one of the reasons why Bitcoin the adoption is slow, kind of like what you're asking about, like when will it happen type thing. It's the fact that Bitcoin is super confusing, and there's a lot of misinformation about it. So some of it's purposeful misinformation, and some of it is just well-meaning, tomfoolery. But those two things basically stop a lot of people that start researching, or they get in the way of proper research, because they're not actually able to get good information. So number one, it's confusing. Two, there's misinformation hiding the actual cool stuff about it. So there's just a huge barrier to entry. I always say people are lucky if they get interested in Bitcoin, because you can't help what you get interested in. If you think about it, like you just get interested in the stuff you're interested in. You don't know why. It's just like certain things kind of tickle your intellectual fancy. So the people that do get interested in Bitcoin, I consider that a lucky blessing for us.
I think about that a lot, actually, because I think I'm an unusual Bitcoiner, and I think there are those graphs of people who are early of Bitcoin on what kind of mindset and characteristics they have, and I'm actually not on the early majority. I'm not on the early adopters. I'm more on the early majority graph. So even from that perspective, I think it was double luck. So it was just something like I was super lucky to get into Bitcoin that early. I mean, 2020. It's kind of early. I think next year will always also be early, but from this perspective, there are Bitcoin OGs that are here for more than 10 years. So I think it's super lucky if you are here, because even if you're very smart, even if you are extremely curious, you might have overlooked it, and you might obsessed with other things. I mean, at that point, 2025, I have to say, if you haven't researched Bitcoin, it's a little bit also your fault. Like I understand in like 2015, 2013 maybe, but now it reached a level where the US government is adopting that. I think if you hear that, and you should at least hear that a little bit somewhere, you should at least ask yourself the question, okay, they're calling it digital gold. What is this thing? So it is a luck, but it gets less and less luck from now on, if you get what I mean.
Oh, that's such a cool perspective to think about, because I totally agree with that. It's definitely luck for those of us that kind of found it prior to 2025, where it actually hit the major news cycles. And it's, you have governments that, president of the largest country in the world basically talking about it. You're right. It does kind of raise the question that most people should look into it at that point. But the fact of the matter is you're still only going to have a certain percentage of the people that will get that interest, and it's probably that 80-20 rule that always plays out everywhere. So you probably will have 80% of the people would just dismiss it because their life is going on. They don't care about politics so much. They don't look at this. They're actually trying to just, they don't even have money to save in the first place. They're just trying to get paycheck to paycheck. And then you'll have 20% of the people that'll actually start researching it because they heard about it. And of that 20%, you'll have another 80-20 split where 80% of them will just look into it. They'll find misinformation or bullshit or somebody telling them the wrong thing. And then they'll buy XRP or something. And then they'll be wrecked, and then they'll never come back, and they'll say, oh, this is all a scam. You know what I'm saying? And then you'll have 20% of the people that'll be like, oh shit, there's something cool here. And they'll be the Bitcoiners of that, and you're going to always have this little anchoring of a crew of core people that actually get the ethos and get why we're here and kind of become Bitcoin only for whatever that's worth, which I actually think that is worth something. I kind of think that's a good filter. And that's one of the things that I'm using at conferences when I'm talking to people. It's is this person actually a Bitcoiner? Because there's a lot of orange washing. I love that term, where people will kind of be shitcoiners, but hey, it's I like Bitcoin, buy my shitcoin type stuff. So I think it's certainly an interesting filter to use.
Let's take a break for a moment and appreciate the beauty that Coin Vigilante has made with the Bitcoin watches. Those watches are the most amazing, the most elegant way of showing that you are a true Bitcoiner. And Coin Vigilante just dropped a completely new and amazing Genesis edition of their watch collections. You have the date of the first ever mined Bitcoin block in there, and of course also the block height and which epoch we are currently in. I love the level of detail they put in this masterpiece. Make sure to check out those amazing Coin Vigilante timepieces down in the descriptions. I love those watches so much. And now if you have Bitcoin, I really do hope that you don't have it on exchange. But if you do have it on exchange, I have two ways for you to deal with that. The first way is you put it on a hardware wallet. That's the entry for you to get into the self-custody game. I recommend BitBox, Bitcoin only edition for that. It's a super simple and secure way. And if you check out the link in the description, you even get 5% off if you use the code Robin. And the second way is the Bitcoin Way. The Bitcoin Way is your all-in partner in terms of how to get the most out of your sovereignty. They will personalize for you a self-custody setup that is perfect for your individual situation. They will show you how you can secure your own devices. Securing your Bitcoin is not enough. You also have to keep all your devices secure. One topic that is overlooked often is the inheritance plan. What happens with your Bitcoin once you are no longer here? Do you have a plan for that in place already? And last but not least, if you're in the jurisdictions where you don't feel safe, it's better to get a plan B. For all that, head over to thebitcoinway.com/Robin to get a 30-minute free call. And just a quick side note, I will be for the first time ever speaking at the Bitcoin Prague event in June. It will be absolutely legendary, and I'm really looking forward to seeing all of you there. You can get your ticket in the link down in the description of Bitcoin Prague, and very important, use code Robin to get 10% off your ticket. I'm really looking forward to seeing you there. Yeah, but you usually can tell very early on.
Yeah, sure.
Sure. I usually know after speaking with someone for 2 minutes if he's a Bitcoiner or a shitcoiner.
Yes, absolutely.
It's so funny.
Yeah, you don't need that long. Yeah, you don't need that long at all. You can basically identify it relatively within the first few sentences of the conversation, for sure. I get that. But yeah, I definitely think that we're going to see some people that will come on right now, and those people I also still consider lucky and early in some sense, because there's going to be people that keep having this revelation. The next halving is going to be 2028, and then the next one's in 2032, and the 2032 halving is when I think we go under 1 Bitcoin per block for the first time. So the block reward drops under 1 BTC per block because of just how we go in half every time. It's either 2032 or 2036. I'm pretty sure it's in 2032. So that's super close to now, realistically 7 years away. So when that happens, I just feel that the supply, realistically, you only have 1% of the Bitcoin supply left to mine from 2032 to like basically 108 years. So, from that point out, if you haven't already got in, then I think you're pretty much like you're late, you know? So, but anybody between now and 2032 that gets in, I think we're still like, okay. But after that, I think it's going to become more of a situation where you won't be able to buy Bitcoin as easily, but you will be able to work for it. And then, your job will just pay you in Bitcoin and stuff like that. Kind of how you said, it'll just transition into the way that the world works, and people won't notice it because it's just, that's what you earn. It's not like, hey, I'm trying to save in Bitcoin. It's just, you're paid in sats, you spend them and you live, and then you, whatever. But yeah, I think that's how it rolls.
Absolutely. Really cool. I'm now already in the situation where I get a fiat salary. It's a business, so I get fiat income, but my majority of my income is actually already in Satoshis, which is super cool. Which also forced me to do one thing. Not forced me, but I'm doing it. I look at two metrics. I look at, okay, what is my income in euros, because I'm in the European Union, so I'm in Austria, and what is my income in Bitcoin? What is my income in Satoshis? And I basically measure not only income, but also net worth in both metrics. And I found it in the income department, it's currently better for me to look at the euros. And in the net worth department, it's currently better to look at Satoshis and Bitcoin. Because in income, it's kind of frustrating over long run. If you're making all those, you're getting better and stuff like that. But because Bitcoin adoption is growing, it's kind of hard to keep up with that and still get the same amount of Bitcoin. And with the net worth, I'm doing in Bitcoin because it's a way more natural and smoother way. Because you see only a number growing a little bit over time. And I like that. And I like to have the stable number, because if you look at it in euros, it's super volatile. and sometimes like Bitcoin is shooting up 50% in like half a year. It's like, see, I'm so good. And then it shoots down 20%. I'm like, everything's crashing down and you feel so bad. So, I came to realize that denominating more and more into Bitcoin in Satoshis is a really good feeling for your inner peace and for your for that to keep that in mind.
Damn, dude, I know what you're saying. That makes so much sense. It's like the stability of it. It's like 1 BTC equals 1 BTC. You look at your balance, it's relatively easy to tell what you got. Whereas like the US dollar thing is just fluctuating, or the euro, it's just fluctuating every second. That is a very interesting way to look at it. And I also think, kind of like you were saying, you were basically describing in some sense the exact conundrum that I was talking about, that people, in essence, you're still doing the same amount of work, but because Bitcoin's price is increasing, the adoption's increasing, you get a smaller amount of Bitcoin for doing the same amount of work, in essence. And I think that just happens more and more as time goes on. So like the longer time goes on, you would do the same amount of work and you'll just earn less Bitcoin because the price of Bitcoin will be higher. And that's just kind of common sense. That's true whether you're, a Bitcoin miner, if you're a machine actually running the network, it's kind of common sense that over time, you're going to do the same amount of work, but because of the halving, you're going to get less Bitcoin. Well, for people, it's the same damn thing, So, that it's like you're living that. And that's so interesting. I know not a lot of people will have that dual income where you have like some in Satoshis and some in US dollars. So that's a very unique perspective that I know not a lot of people will have, but that's really cool because it kind of opens up that Zen feeling of saying, hey, yes, both ways it's coming, but if you actually just measure it in terms of Bitcoin, it's like it's much more balanced, and it's actually like gives you a sense of peace, which there's value in that. That's kind of unspoken.
Yeah, and I'm also happy currently that I still have both, because I still need to pay in both. So one of my post-production members is taking salary in in Bitcoin. One of them takes it in fiat. So I have to do some orange billing on the data side. You have bills on the Bitcoin side, on the fiat side. And it's great to have both things. And I hope I can keep it equal, that I don't have to exchange a lot with exchanges in between. But back to you. I actually wanted to start with one question, and we're already 40 minutes in, and I haven't asked my first question yet. I wanted to ask you the question: why do you focus on Bitcoin with your art? Because you're doing art, and as an artist, you can basically focus on anything. You can make the same art you're doing with a different theme. Why do you focus on Bitcoin?
Oh, it's a great question. And yeah, worth waiting the 40 minutes for, not a problem. So I think to me, the art is kind of an extension of your life. And in some way, it's like, it's so many things to me. One, it's like a teaching tool. Like I like to use art as a way to tell a story, like, and I like the story to be cool and interesting. And a lot of times I get interested in, things that are in the real world. And so I want to basically explain what I think is cool about that. And I think the way that I can do that best is through the art. So pretty much my whole life I've done art. Around 2008, I first started selling art, maybe a little earlier than that. I think maybe like 2005-ish was the first time I might have done like some really little trinkets where I set out a blanket at a concert and tried to sell some. It actually went really well. I think I sold all the little art pieces that I made there, and that was really rewarding. And I kind of built from there. And in the past, I did art that was all psychedelic art, because I was very much into psychedelics, because I thought it was like a technology that was misunderstood in essence. Like it was kind of really actually wholesome and good family value stuff, but it was just portrayed by the media and the government in a totally different light. And it was actually a tool that people could use to benefit their lives. And I wanted to tell that story, something like, hey, this is something that you're not being told. This is actually what's going on. And I did that for many years, pretty much from that 2005 time to around 2016-ish, 2017. And then in 2017, I encountered Bitcoin, and that really kind of captured my mind. And it's the same thing where I see this really amazing revolutionary technology that can be used as a tool for self-sovereignty. I actually see both psychedelics and Bitcoin as complementary revolutionary technologies. They're both tools that people can use to better their lives, their family, their community, the whole world. These are things that are very powerful, but they're both misrepresented. The government tells you one thing about it. You hear all this stuff. Oh, it's used for criminals, drug dealers, and, all the worst. Whereas actually, like, that's not the real story. Although to some degree, I do have the saying that, if your drug dealer doesn't want it, it's not real money. So there's that side of it too. But I think there's a lot of depth that gets missed, and art is that sly roundabout way that I can use to kind of get people interested in Bitcoin. Like we were saying, it's kind of lucky when you do get interested in Bitcoin, and art, I think, is an interesting way to bring people in. Some people get brought in by education, by podcasts, by books, by movies. Some people get brought in, through art. So I think that's the contribution that I bring. But for me, it's super important, because I think you basically don't have very long on this planet. We get a very super limited time, and that's one of the things that Bitcoin teaches you. And so what you should be doing with your time is basically the most important thing to you, the most important thing in the world to you. And, it's like, I'm trying to find that thing, trying to keep building myself towards that. Like, and I think like Bitcoin is the way to get there for me. It's certainly an unending well of inspiration to pull upon. It's like every time I look at Bitcoin, there's something new and cool about it that's like, oh, that's, inspiring in so many ways. And there's just so many ways to translate this into something that might be visually intriguing to other people. So, I think we have to lean into what we're good in life. And I think like the art thing comes to me very fluidly. Like I kind of get into a state where it's just like, there's nothing else going on. There's no time, there's no space. Like my wife will come to me. She's like, yo, you haven't eaten all day. What's going on? But I won't even feel hungry, because I'm just lost in what I'm doing. It's like, there's this like beautiful harmony of just the creative process that is that kind of drives me. Like I have this feeling every day where if I'm not doing something or moving towards that goal of kind of bringing something into the world, that I'm messing up. I gotta, I gotta kind of get on it. So there's certainly this desire, this need to create that is buried deep within me. And I don't dislike that in any way. I thrive off that.
In many ways, art is, as a podcast, like a form of communication, but it's just a different form of doing that. I like that view of like art as a form of communication. Really, really nice. Was it actually hard to start being an Bitcoin artist? I talked with someone. it's like it's harder to monetize, especially in the beginning.
Oh yeah, man. Like, well, art is a luxury item, so those are always a hard sell in sense. Like art's not a necessity. You don't really need that to provide food, clothing, or shelter for your family. Art is something you buy after all those are secured. And so, number one, it's a luxury item from top to bottom. Number two, unless you do functional art, like if you make spoons or knives or something cool that people need to like eat, or like something, a cup or a plate, like okay. But if you're doing like wall art like I do, then that's like a really okay, that's basically something that nobody actually needs to live. So yes, it's a hard sell. But when you add that on top of the fact that you're like, for me, I only sell the art in Bitcoin. I don't actually, even though it's Bitcoin art, I don't like accept fiat for it. I'll only sell it in Bitcoin. So that limits the market even further because nobody wants to spend their Bitcoin. So it's like extremely hard to sell Bitcoin art if you want to basically do it like that. I'm sure that if you sell Bitcoin art and you also accept fiat, then it's going to be one level easier, but that doesn't make it, I wouldn't put it in the easy realm. However, I think the good part about doing it for Bitcoin only is that it makes you raise your game. So I understand that unless I bring a really top level thing, that nobody's going to basically come off their Bitcoin for it. So I have to basically do something good enough, excellent enough for someone to say, man, I really like that enough to part with some Bitcoin. And it's hard to do that. So like I basically will spend, usually it takes months and months to create like a piece, because I know it's like in some sense, it's like I'm mining Bitcoin, like I'm basically putting in my work here and I'm taking these art supplies and some imagination, in the end, it's like, yes, there's all these input costs plus the time, but in the end, I'm hoping that I'll mine some Bitcoin. And, sometimes you do, sometimes you don't. But the cool thing is with art, I guess if you're doing Bitcoin mining, you don't mine a block, then you just have an electricity bill. But if I make an art piece that I really love and I don't sell it, then actually I still have it and I still love it.
I like that way. I talked, and I don't want to, I don't know if he wants to share that information publicly, so I won't say his name. But I sat down with someone in Bitcoin who has a shop, and he was thinking about doing it Bitcoin only versus also having fiat, and he deducted, I think, 2 or 3 weeks experiment and just deleted the fiat option to pay. Like he had Bitcoin and fiat. And before the experiment, he was very nervous because 80% of his revenue was actually in fiat. What happened is that 70% of the revenue was just missing. So some were still buying, in Bitcoin. So some of the 80% were actually converting to also then buy it in Bitcoin. But overall, his revenue just dropped dramatically because people didn't want to spend their Bitcoin, even though this is a Bitcoin shop. So you only shop there if you are a Bitcoiner. And that's super interesting when you think about then only doing Bitcoin. There's, for example, BTC also. They are doing from the starting just Bitcoin. Like you can only buy with Bitcoin there, and only sell it in Bitcoin. This is something I really, really admire. Like having that clear ethical thing of like, I only accept Bitcoin, is really, really massive. I like also the way, BTC Sessions, Ben from BTC Session does. He said it actually on my podcast. He said, if someone insists in paying in fiat, he charges a 15% premium on that. So that's also an interesting way of incentivizing people to pay in Bitcoin. But obviously, not even Bitcoiners want to spend their Bitcoin, so it's a hard thing to do. So I admire that you do that.
Thanks. Well, that makes sense. And it's actually a really interesting story about that shop. And I would expect that would be true across the board for most places, is that the revenue, you're going to have some people that just won't spend their Bitcoin. And some people that just, they may be, Bitcoiners, but they don't have it on exchange or something. They don't know how to send it around. They don't feel comfortable with it. So they want to spend their fiat or whatever. So yeah, I think that for shops like that, it's really cool to see that. And I think over time that will build the right clientele for them if they can survive in that type of a market. I definitely can relate, and it is what it is, but I think it definitely, it makes it easier in a lot of ways. But I think that it's that Gresham's law where people just want to spend the bad money first. So if they have any fiat, they would prefer to spend that before they spend their Bitcoin. So it just makes it a difficult situation for those Bitcoin only shops. But I do think that the more these that you see succeeding, the more of a hard line in the sand you'll see, because I think that they'll be successful over time. Like there's the Tahini's restaurant that actually, they take fiat for the food services that they provide, but they basically turn that into Bitcoin. In some sense, that's like the way that they mine Bitcoin is through shawarma or falafels, like they make their stuff and then they convert it into Bitcoin. So you have both sides of it. And the thing that Ben said actually makes a lot of sense. Like if you're going to accept both, then you actually put the premium on the fiat and say, hey, like this caused so much friction and so much. There's usually extra fees and extra nonsense that you have to deal with to accept fiat as well. So it's certainly worth at least that 15% premium. And I think over time you'll see, like we said, like we'll all be Bitcoiners. It'll just be abstracted into the background, and that's not going to even be a thing anymore. But I think the more of us that are online with it, I think that does create the right optics. I think that it is a good, healthy thing for a business to do. It's just tricky to navigate in this world. You just have to really bring your best and understand that it's a tough thing out there for people to try to spend their Bitcoin, especially as people acquire it nowadays. I think maybe earlier it might have been a little easier, but nowadays where most people are getting it through exchanges, it tends to be a little more friction, I think, to onboard. So we'll see once that kind of goes away, where it's just more circular economy, where people that have Bitcoin are spending it, and with vendors that accept it, and then those vendors then spend it around. I think that will start to see a whole new flourishing of the monetary aspects as well of Bitcoin.
How important is it for Bitcoiners to start thinking about spending Bitcoin and trying to power up that circular economy?
Man, it's a tough question. I think it's super important. I actually think it would be great to see to see a more robust circular economy with Bitcoiners producing on both sides of it. Bitcoiners producing the goods that are being consumed, and then Bitcoiners buying the goods that are consumed. So you have this true circular economy, because now a lot of times places might accept Bitcoin, but it could just be like overstock.com or something accepts Bitcoin, for example. Whereas something like me, it's like actually is a Bitcoiner that is producing the art, and then you're buying it in Bitcoin, and it kind of stays in that economy. I think that type of thing is super important. So I think we're going to see a lot more of that, because I think the same thing that I'm doing with art would just be true across the board. You will see it with mechanics, bakers, lawyers, doctors. Everybody will do the same thing where, oh, okay, I'm accepting Bitcoin, and and then those people are just paying in Bitcoin. And then I think like that type of thing will just have a virtuous cycle where it would just create benefits for everybody who's involved. And then those on the outside of it will kind of look in and see this abundance that's happening and start to, it's kind of obvious. I think that's when things start to catch on, is when, people see their neighbors benefiting from it. Like someone you know.
It's the hardest question to answer probably, but do you think it's a peaceful revolution?
I don't know. I mean, I have read some fiction stories about like monetary collapses and whatnot, and if that's the way that it goes, then I don't know if that would be peaceful, but the way the world's going right now is certainly looking much more in that way, where we're seeing like actual countries talking about adopting Bitcoin. It kind of makes you think, because I think we all go through these shitcoinery phases in some sense. Like the nations will go through it, just like you as an individual might go through it. Like you, I'm calling it shitcoinery, but it's just like a phase where you don't actually understand Bitcoin well. You know about it, you want to get some, you may even have some, but you don't like fully get like what it is. And I think like anybody, that's true with all of us, like we don't fully get it, but there's a level of not fully getting it that's that you really haven't achieved yet. So because of that, there's going to be a lot of dissonance, and like there'll be a lot of growth and whatnot. So you'll see probably some countries will get hacked and all their Bitcoin will get lost, and then they'll learn about, oh damn, we got to secure our stuff a little better. And like everybody else will also learn at the same time. The whole world will be like, oh, that sucks. We don't want that to happen to us. So like there'll be a lot of growth, but then at the same time, the thing like we see in Bhutan, where they're using their natural resources to mine Bitcoin, but then using the money that they earn from that to pay for the public servants. So all the politicians, I guess, are paid through the Bitcoin that they mine with the country's resources rather than taxes. Like that to me is so wholesome. You see stuff like that. It's like a virtuous cycle. So it's like you need to install the mining equipment and, the facilities, and then all the staff, all that's like basically jobs for your local community, and it's like creating this cool abundance and funding the public works without having to like be funded through taxes. It's actually funded through proof of work. So I think you'll see more of this happening as well. So you'll see both sides of it, the good and the bad. And because of that, it'll just, over time, I think over time, there's just no other way around it. It is going to be violent in some places and peaceful in other places. I think just like the world is like, like some places will come online much easier and some places will resist, and it'll probably be a whole different story. I think the thing is like with Bitcoin always, it's just the earlier to adopt, the better the country or the business or the individual will be. It's kind of like the sooner you come to terms with, hey, this is actually good for us, we should figure out how to work with it, then the better it is for y'all. If you kind of like find it and want to change it, or find it and want to like, extract value from it, then it's kind of like you get the FAFO experience.
It's very much like the internet. Those countries who adopted it and used it as early as possible and embraced it rather than regulated it and tried to like ban it and stuff like that, have profited from that more. And also, when you look at the internet, there are places where there is no internet. There are places where there's no electricity. And there's places where if there's no electricity, people go on the streets and have riots. So, so the different places adopt Bitcoin also differently. I think that's a very good way to look at that, of like, okay, we have places without electricity, we have places without internet, we have places without those things. And yeah, we will also have probably a long time places without Bitcoin, because you kind of need the other things also to exist there. You need some sort of electricity for Bitcoin to make global sense in that way. I think that's a very based way at looking at that.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense, and certainly if you don't have electricity, it makes it hard to run Bitcoin. Certainly not impossible. We can do a lot of cool analog Bitcoin stuff, but yeah, it makes it a lot trickier. And like you said, everybody's going to have different times when they come online to it. And it just brings me back to that Citadel story, and you don't know if like what the future is going to be, if like you'll have this situation where there'll be like the Bitcoin, Bitcoin caste system in some sense, where it's like, hey, like the people that were smart enough to, or lucky enough to get on the arc earlier, benefited exponentially versus the places that were longer to come online, and those places just, they suffer in terms of development and education and health and all the things that are important. So we'll see. I don't know. I don't think it would be that dark, but it just does make me think of that short story.
Absolutely. I do hope. And I think we have, as Bitcoin, is kind of a responsibility. If we are kind and loving in the orange pilling, I think you make a good way of making that whole thing peaceful. If we Bitcoiners are assholes and they're like, oh, like have fun staying poor in the worst possible way, there's the higher chance of a non-peaceful revolution. And the way Bitcoin is getting adopted and the way Bitcoiners are reacting to things, I think those things actually matter in the long run, and it has some trickle effects. I think. One other topic that I kind of wanted to get into with you was AI. As an artist, do you use it, and how do you see the connection between like AI and Bitcoin?
Well, that's a good question. I do use AI for all kinds of stuff. I do use it in my art absolutely as well. And I think it's just amazing. I think there's just so much that we can leverage it to better our lives in so many ways. I do think this is another one of those tools that people can use. I think right now it's one of those things where it exists in mostly walled gardens, meaning that you have to use these trusted third parties like OpenAI or Anthropic or the DeepSeek or whoever's developing these things. Most people aren't running these AI things at home, or Midjourney for the art side of it, and things like that. Most of the people aren't capable, or they're not open source to run at home. And even if you were running it at home, it may take like a relatively large investment in infrastructure, meaning that you have to be careful what you feed into the machine. However, I think the abilities that it gives you, it almost turns you into a super person, because I've just learned so much from using it. It basically can kind of help you research things and understand things better that you didn't understand, and kind of give you like a little bit of a more holistic perspective in a tailored way, rather than kind of Google searching for things. So if you Google search for it, you may come up with certain information, but this is actually much more tailored to specifically what you asked. And for example, I'm doing an art thing right now, nothing big. I just actually, a lot of my machines have been down. I'm just trying to set stuff up and just wanted to do a little fun design to do on the thing, and make sure it works. And I was able to, I want to go to this concert at the end of the month, and I can't get tickets for it. It's actually sold out. So I was like, oh, maybe I can make like an art piece about the band, and I'll just sit in the parking lot and try to like somebody give me a ticket for like a cool little art thing. And so I took, this band has played at this venue many different times. And so I just took, there's a database of all their information. So I just took the database and downloaded it. And then I used AI to do basically format the data and then start turning it into art. And it was just such a cool thing to see how I was able to just basically use the data to define what the art actually looked like. So for example, I would say, I want to show a circle with the top 50 songs that they played at this venue. I want each song to be like a little different glyph, and I want the width of that glyph to be defined by how many times they played that song at that venue. And then I also want to show which years they played it in, by the color of the thing. And then it will give you some code, and then it basically it taught me, okay, here's the code, and then okay, well, how do I use this? Okay, here's what you do. You just open up a text editor, you dot this in there, you save it as a .html file, and then you can set up a local server and you just put it like this, and now you have your own website basically that's displaying this art. And it's even neat because I could then start linking things and say, hey, well, if I want to see every song that played in this year, I want them all to be this color. And it basically can help you set it up. And then at first, you don't even have to understand any of the code that it gives you. You just basically copy, paste it, and then just click enter and just see what happens. And sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. If it doesn't, you get an error and you tell it. If it does, it's like, man, this is amazing. Like, I can't believe that this happened. And then if something's not right about it, you can actually like have it tell you like, oh, hey, well, I don't like this. I need to bring this up a little. It's overlapping something else, or I need this thing to be vertical instead of horizontal. Tell me how to do that. So then it tells you how to, like, oh, you go to this line in the code and you change this number. So you go from not understanding anything about that code to actually seeing like, oh, hey, this is how it works. And then you can start to go through it. And then there's other things you can change that you didn't need to ask the AI for. You could actually just start figuring like, oh, like, okay, this is how it works. And then that just changes your whole life, because now you know how to do something that you didn't know how to do yesterday. And the learning curve was so fast because it's just like all the individual little things, were addressed. It's like, well, hey, I don't understand what this is. Why is that? And basically the thing explains it to you with the understanding that, yes, sometimes these things hallucinate, sometimes they get it wrong. So it takes a little working with it. So like, as you're doing like this weird coding stuff with it, sometimes like what you do doesn't work, or it does like an unexpected thing. And you just have to work with it and say like, hey, this is what happened. Like, why is it doing this? Or I got this error. But at one point, it was doing something wrong. You know, like there was like some ring that I wanted, and it just wasn't matching up with the ring above it. And I needed everything to be perfectly spaced and aligned, and it should. There was no reason that the thing should. And I was like, what's wrong? Why aren't you getting this right? What are you trying to do here? And it gave me an explanation that was just so wild. It basically started creating equations based on the information that I gave it, and like assigning different songs and names, like variable numbers, and this to the cube to that. And it was doing like all these really wild, like mathematics. And I was like, even though it got it wrong, the level of this help that I'm getting is so amazing. Cause like I couldn't hire somebody that's this smart to get the answer wrong. You know, like the level of this help is just so high that it's crazy. You know, it's like, okay, even though it's wrong, the way that he got it wrong was just so beautiful and elegant and interesting that it's like, man, this is just a really interesting tool to leverage. So, you know, you just keep working with it. And I think there's all kinds of interesting things that artists can do with it. For example, another way that I use AI is if you want to do any kind of art, say you want to draw a cat or whatever, you'll usually go onto Google and search what a cat looks like, pictures of a cat, so you could then draw it, so you know what you get your proportions right. However, some things you want to draw might not exist yet, or you don't want to use like a copyrighted picture from someone else, for example. So you can actually use AI to create reference images that just don't exist in the world. So no one's ever actually seen this reference image before. And so you use that to draw from, and, or to actually pull shapes from. Sometimes it's like you'll be designing something and you, say, hey, well, you know, show me a bunch of these type of things. And by looking at these weird AI, you know, hallucinations of what it thinks this subject that you have is, sometimes it gives you what you think you wanted. And other times it'll give you a totally wild perspective that is related, but not what you had originally assumed. But sometimes it leads you onto a new path that's actually very interesting. And other times, like, it's just like a simple shape that you find. It's like, oh, hey, there's this design. I really love the way that it put this there. That's just so cool. And you just steal it because you just, you know, you take it from the AI, which basically is working with you to come up with these things. So yeah, I think there's a lot of interesting ways to use it, but I mean, I've used AI for the very first time I used AI was I think one of the original ChatGPT versions, but I had this guy that was, going to lay a concrete slab at my house, and he gave me a price that sounded ridiculous to me. I was like, that sounds too much, you know? But I didn't know how to tell him, because I don't know how to calculate the volume of concrete that it's an amount that's like an area volume that you have to calculate. So I didn't know how to do that. So I went to AI and I was like, hey, like if I have a concrete pad that's this size, and you know, what should be the amount of concrete that's going in there? Cause he was charging by the yard, I think. Like, so it was like this much per yard, and he gave me some amount that just seemed ridiculous. And then when the AI told me it was like way less than that, and I was like, holy shit. I was like, well, how could I verify this? And it was like, oh, well, you can go to this. And it turns out there's actually calculators online that you could just go and they'll tell you how to figure out the concrete slab thing. It's like totally a thing. I hadn't thought of that. But the point of it is that basically this guy wanted to overcharge me by thousands and thousands of dollars. And my like $20 that I had paid for the AI was just like totally paid off in the first day. So ever since then, which was like, I feel like 2022, I've been using it for all kinds of stuff, you know, it's just wild, you know, pretty much anything that I can think of, from saving money to concrete to doing these wild data art things.
It's the use cases are unimaginable. It's so fascinating. I use it on a daily basis for emails. I rarely write emails myself now. And I have folders for that, so it already knows exactly how I want to have emails written, I, for anything that comes up that is not logical for me, I like, hey, like, why? I got an invoice from my landlord, and I was like, I don't have to pay that. And I was like, okay, but I don't want to deal with that either. So I was just giving the invoice and the message what I got from the landlord directly to the AI. AI was like, okay, that doesn't sound good. Let's write this back. And then I think 2-3 days, AI was writing basically with my landlord. I was not typing anything myself.
Wow.
And then at the end, my landlord said, "Oh, you are right. I will go back and see if I can find, like, because he he basically didn't provide good enough information to actually charge me that, and it was not clear if he's even able to charge me for that. And now he went back and was like, okay, I have to see more about that, and I didn't hear back from my landlord since a month now." And it was basically, I think, an invoice for like 300 euros.
Wow.
And I was like, I'm not paying a blank invoice without information. And I didn't do anything. I just gave the information from the landlord to the AI, and AI, like, I was just, I was just seeing it. I had to copy and paste all the time, but that's all I did.
It's perfect use case. You know, it like reduces your frustration, and you don't, you know, like you don't have to go through all those emotions of writing it out, and it probably does a better job and doesn't forget things or miss. Oh, I forgot to include this part. You know, it should for the most part get it good. That's amazing.
And the thing that you just said is, it doesn't have emotions, because if emotions comes into play, you're like, oh, like, why are you saying this to me? Humans are flawed with emotions. It's good that we have emotions, but sometimes it's bad that we have emotions. And in those situations, I just like to let AI deal with it. It's basically, you know, before AI, you had to hire like an assistant, or like someone that comes from college or from a university, and like, hey, like, can you deal with that? And you pay them, I don't know, like $2,000, $3,000, $4,000 a month, whatever it is. And now you can get this, not the same, but a very similar, in most areas, a very similar quality of work already, for like $20 a month. And I don't get how people don't pay that. I'm like, $20, that's nothing.
Right. Yeah. I mean, right there, that saved you $300 on that one thing in your life, and that's just one interaction with it. It's like, I'm sure you said you use it for all kinds of stuff. The value is so high. I think I really think these things are super cool. I'm excited for them to become. I really like the open source models that they have, and I think that it's going to be neat to see those come a long way, especially with the recent ones that seem to be competitive against the very closed source models. We've heard that there's no moat sometimes with the open source, between the open source and the commercialized versions, and I think now we're actually seeing that. And I think the acceleration is so fast as well that it's just amazing. If you see, I saw a post the other day that showed the Mid-Journey pictures that they were generating in version 1, which was sometime in 2022, and the stuff that they were producing towards the end of 2024. And it was like every 2 or 3 months, maybe they were releasing their new version or a version update, and you could see significant differences from the same prompt that was put in. At one point it basically looked like a retarded, person painted it with their foot. And then now it's like photorealistic, where you can barely tell the difference between an actual photograph and whether, it's something created by one of these models. And, that just happened in the span of basically 2 years. But the fact is like every few months, it just seems like we're seeing a relatively large jump. But even every week, I see some Twitter accounts that just say "This Week in AI," and it's just like, if you just look at those, one of their posts every week in AI, there's like ridiculous amount of stuff going on, because there's just so many different things going on and so many different facets. So we have just coding, we have art, the visual arts, we have writing, like people doing novels and things like that. Then we have the movies, the new AI movie thing that's been going on. That's like huge right now. Now there's text to 3D. So you could do like a, you know, a text prompt and get a true 3D model that people are using in games and 3D printing and all kinds of stuff. That's fucking amazing. You know, you're going to have text to CAD. Like basically you don't have to hire an engineer to do like part design for you. You say like, hey, I broke this thing on my lawnmower and this is the basically piece that it is. And, even if they don't have that piece online, you just give it the measurements and it can probably model you up something that you can then either have manufactured or make yourself, and then you go on your way. I mean, it's these type of things, like we kind of have heard, say like in the 3D print revolution, how 3D printing was going to change the world and whatnot. So sometimes you get these hit and misses. I kind of don't feel like this AI thing is one of the hit and misses. It just seems like there's so many things happening in different like I said, disciplines, but they're all like popping off and they're all kind of doing pretty good, you know, like, and as you see time go on, you hear the people say like, this is the worst it's ever going to be, you know, from here on out, it's like, it's only getting better. So it's really just kind of mind boggling, I think, to see the capabilities that we will have in just a few short years.
100%. And I have empathy for the people that sleep on Bitcoin and AI.
Yes. Yeah. I have a friend that was telling me like, you know, the people that don't use it are just falling behind. And it's so true, because it's like literally like having, kind of like you said, it's like actually having an employee or a personal assistant that's there to help you and do the grunt work that you don't want to do, but you need to do and get done and stuff. Like you need to send that email to the landlord. You don't want to pay the $300. Like this is actually like an employee that basically does it for you. Are you kidding me? You know? And for $20 a month, like you were saying, it's like crazy.
Absolutely. It's a cheat code. it's absolutely a cheat code.
Yeah, we have these cheat codes here. Bitcoin, psychedelics, AI.
I have one question that I ask each and every one of my guests. And the question is, what can we learn from you besides Bitcoin?
Well, I just think that maybe my whole mission is just to tell people that there are tools out there, and you know, in addition to Bitcoin, we just mentioned 2 other ones that you can use that help you be a more self-sovereign individual. And I think the more self-sovereignty you can claw back from the world, the more agency you can take, the more time of your own you can harvest back from the attention seekers, the better off that you'll be. I think, you know, like you can use the first principle thinking that comes from being a Bitcoiner and apply that across your life to everything else that's outside Bitcoin, and you will just continue to reap rewards and benefits from these type of right actions. So I think that
I love that, and it perfectly fits to our end routine. Our end routine is a question from the previous guest is asking a question for the next guest without knowing who the next guest is, and the question just fits so nicely. How has adopting Bitcoin changed your worldview?
Adopting Bitcoin has definitely changed my worldview massively in 2 specific ways that I can think of. One, it created a longer time horizon in my thinking. So the art that I made pre-Bitcoin, it was not something that I would think about, oh, is this person going to have it for, you know, 100 years or something like that. That concept wasn't in my mind. You know, I was thinking like I was making art and basically people would take it home. They probably would put it on the shelf. Some people might put it up, but I didn't really think too much about that, or the longevity of it, or maybe somebody might want to pass that down to someone else in their family. Whereas now, when I make an art piece, it's like I'm thinking in kind of Bitcoin terms, which is a much longer time frame, you know, at least going out to 2140. So, but it's like you think in much longer time spans and actually generations of families, not just the person buying it from you, but like everybody down the line. So that's something that just totally was not there before Bitcoin. I didn't think at all like that. But now when I make an art piece, it's like I want to make something that somebody is going to want to hold and cherish for hundreds or thousands of years if possible. And I try to make it in materials that would make that possible, you know, so like as long as it's cared for properly, this should last 1,000 years. So, you know, it's like that type of thinking is new to me. So that's certainly from Bitcoin. I also had some like health and dietary changes that came through Bitcoin, like social community stuff. Like I changed my diet. I used to be vegetarian for since like, I don't know, the year 2000. I was basically vegetarian all the way up until I think like 2023. And then I had been hearing like meat stuff in the Bitcoin community for a while, and at some point in October, I just switched over to carnivore, and I basically have stayed that ever since that time. So that was a huge change in my life, to just kind of go from this one basically eating perspective to another, and that has brought all kinds of shifts in my mind, like, because I always thought I was eating healthy before. As a vegetarian my whole life, I thought that was like healthy eating, and then I tried this for 30 days, like the carnivore thing, and it just like, well, I actually felt a lot better than I had before, and I was like, man, and I just, maybe I should stick with this. So I kind of have gone that route, and I've actually felt so good that many times, like, man, it's like, you wonder what else in life you have been taught, in quotes, that's just completely inaccurate and that you bought into, it's like for a huge amount of your life. So that's just one of those things that kind of Bitcoin like brought into my awareness. And I just couldn't imagine this probably like a few years ago, even if you told me, but it's just one of those things that just the community kind of brings up these non-Bitcoin related things sometimes that keep popping up. And then if you pay attention and look into it, kind of like you said, it's like there's certain things that you can ignore for a while, but if you are curious and you come across it with enough touch points from sources that you think are relatively decent, then if you don't investigate, then it kind of falls on you at that point. And to me, I don't know. I think it's like, I tend to be extreme in some ways, but I do believe in the acid test, and like what some people claim for themselves may not work for you. So I saw, like people making all these wild claims about the carnivore thing, and I was like, well, I don't know if any of that's bullshit or not, but the only way to find out is to give it a try. It doesn't seem like harmful, especially if you do it on the short term. And then, so I think that's the only way with a lot of stuff, is to go check it out if you think that there's merit or value for you there.
That's interesting. If you're honest and if you are curious and you really investigate something, like you will discover there's a lot of things out there that society preaches that is actually not that good. But that's a whole different rabbit hole to go down. Thank you so much, Fractal, for being on the show. Before I let you go, where can people find you, ask you questions, and reach out to you and see your art?
Well, they can find me on Twitter, which I guess is X now. Just look up FractalEncrypt. It's one word. And I also have a website, timechainartifacts.com. You can check out if you're interested in seeing some of the art.
Thank you so much for being on. It was a pleasure. Thank you for taking the time. Also, thank you so much for everyone that is watching and listening, for joining us today. As always, I'll be back tomorrow with another episode. Bye-bye.